Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us.
I'm excited.
Today, we're going to be tackling something I think a lot of people are interested in, and that's narcissism.
It's everywhere.
It really is, isn't it? And what's really cool about this deep dive is that all of our source material is actually in Spanish.
Oh, why?
We're getting to look at this from a different cultural perspective as well.
Yeah, how fascinating.
So you ready to dive in?
Absolutely, I am.
Okay. So narcissism, it's everywhere.
It is.
YouTube especially is full of just tons and tons of content on narcissism, and a
Yeah.
lot of it focuses on blame and victimhood.
Right.
But this deep dive, we're really going to try to get into some more nuanced views. And one of the things that I found so interesting about these Spanish sources is that they talk about how people who are raised in unstable environments are much more likely to be susceptible to narcissists in their life.
Makes sense.
It does, doesn't it?
I mean, if you think about it,
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff stems from really our earliest relationships, right? And our earliest experiences of the world.
Right.
So if those experiences are rooted in instability, in chaos, in a lack of safety and security,
Yeah.
then it makes sense that we would be drawn to those same patterns later in life.
And especially, I think they were talking about, like, you have a parent who's maybe chronically ill or an alcoholic parent.
Right.
You're already
dealing with those avoidant tendencies.
You're already in that survival mode.
Absolutely.
Where you need to be hyper aware of what's going on around you.
And trying to control your environment.
Right. And trying to predict, maybe even manipulate situations
To feel safe.
to feel safe, right? And then the source actually highlighted this specific story of Miguel.
Oh, tell me about Miguel.
Okay, so Miguel grew up with a mom who had a chronic illness, and he always was craving stability and security, but because of his mom's illness, he just never really got it at home.
Oh, that's sad.
It is sad, right?
Yeah.
And so as an adult, he found himself in this string of relationships where he was constantly trying to fix his partners. And these partners had all of these avoidant and chaotic behaviors, which is what the source material calls predatory personalities.
It's so interesting because it sounds like he's almost recreating that early environment.
He is.
In a way, trying to get a different outcome this time.
Right.
But with the same kind of familiar dynamic.
It makes me think, we talk about these predatory personalities and we think of the very obvious manipulator.
Sure.
But the source material was saying it can be anyone.
Oh, absolutely.
They even mentioned psychologists.
And coaches and spiritual leaders.
Yeah. And I thought, wow.
Yeah. Positions of power.
It's so true, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's important to note.
It is.
It's not about demonizing entire professions.
Right.
But it's about understanding that anyone in a position of power can have these tendencies.
Right.
And someone like Miguel, who is already primed to seek out that familiar dynamic,
Yes.
might be especially vulnerable
To that kind of abuse.
to that kind of abuse, even when it's subtle.
Wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
that makes it seem like they're everywhere.
They are to a certain extent.
So how do we even
Yeah.
begin to protect ourselves?
Well, the source material talks about the importance of critical thinking and discernment.
Okay. Question everything.
To a degree, yes.
Yeah.
But it's more than just being skeptical, right?
Right.
It's about actively evaluating information,
Okay.
considering different perspectives,
Yeah,
and really tuning into your own intuition.
Okay.
Does something feel off? Why are you drawn to this particular person or message?
Right.
Those gut feelings often hold important clues.
They do, don't they?
Yeah.
That's so true.
I think we often override those
We do.
because we want to believe the best in people,
Or because we think we know better.
or because we think we know better, exactly.
Yeah.
But that inner wisdom
Yeah.
is usually trying to tell us something.
So true. Okay, so another thing that really jumped out at me was how much content there is out there that focuses on blaming external factors for our problems.
Oh, yeah, the blame game.
And these sources actually called out YouTubers specifically, and they were saying that some of them capitalize on this tendency to scapegoat.
Right. It's so much easier to blame a political party or our ex or even, a whole generation.
Or Hitler.
Or Hitler or Trump. It's like,
Yeah.
it's easier to point the finger outward
Right.
than it is to look inward.
It's not me, it's the narcissists
Exactly. And unfortunately,
in the world.
some content creators exploit that
Yeah.
by offering these simplistic explanations and scapegoats,
Right.
which really just fuels polarization.
And harmful prejudices.
Absolutely. And, it prevents us from doing the real work.
The inner work.
The inner work, exactly.
So we keep coming back to this idea that it's dangerous to oversimplify things and label everyone who maybe has some narcissistic tendencies as abusive.
Right.
But how do we know the difference?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, because it seems like these days everyone's calling everyone a narcissist.
Right. And it's diluting the meaning of what is actually a very serious psychological condition.
Right.
Narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, is a clinical diagnosis.
With very specific criteria.
Exactly. Not every selfish action
Yeah.
is a sign of NPD.
Okay, so it's like the degree and the context.
The degree, the context.
If someone cuts me off in traffic,
Right.
maybe they're just having a bad day.
Maybe they didn't see you.
Right. It doesn't mean they have NPD.
Exactly.
Ah,
But if someone is consistently exploiting and manipulating others
yeah.
for their own personal gain,
Right.
leaving a trail of destruction in their wake, that's a different story.
That's a whole other
That's a whole other thing.
level. Right.
Right. And the source material makes a point of saying that this oversimplification is not only inaccurate,
Right.
but it's also potentially harmful
How so?
because it prevents us from truly understanding the nuances of human behavior
And the nuances of narcissism.
and the nuances of
Yeah.
narcissism. Exactly.
Yeah, and I think this makes me think about all of these movies and TV shows
Yeah.
where we see these psychopaths, like
Right.
they're these super obvious villains.
Like Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah,
Right.
but the source material is saying that the reality is much more insidious.
It is. Hollywood often depicts psychopaths as overtly aggressive,
Yeah,
but real life manipulation can be very subtle
and invisible.
and invisible,
Mm.
making it much harder to detect.
So you might not even realize you're being manipulated.
Exactly. And the source material gives this really interesting example of Maria,
Okay.
who sought therapy after a series of difficult relationships.
Okay.
And the therapist, who she trusted completely,
Oh no.
started subtly undermining her confidence
Wow.
and isolating her from her support system
So she didn't even realize she was being manipulated.
until it was too late.
Wow, that's a chilling example.
It is, isn't it?
And it really just highlights how important it is to pay attention to our intuition
Yes.
and those subtle red
Those
flags.
red flags are always there,
They are.
but we don't really see them.
Yeah, but it's not always easy to do that, is it?
No, it's not.
Especially when we're feeling vulnerable.
Especially when we're feeling vulnerable, and that's where self-awareness comes in.
Okay.
And that leads us to what I think is one of the most crucial points in all of this.
Okay.
Instead of constantly blaming others for our problems,
Yeah.
what if we turn that lens inward?
You mean examine our own role
Exactly.
in a situation?
The source material calls for self-critique,
Right.
not in a self-flagellating way,
Yeah.
but as a tool for growth.
I like that.
Yeah, it's about asking ourselves, what patterns am I repeating?
Mm.
What needs am I trying to get met, and am I going about it in a healthy way?
Okay, so this brings me back to Miguel,
Yes.
who kept being drawn to these partners who were emotionally unavailable,
Just like his mother.
just like his mother.
Right.
But instead of blaming them for his unhappiness,
Right.
what if he had asked himself why he kept choosing those types of people?
Exactly. That's the kind of introspection that the source material encourages.
So it's not about blaming ourselves.
No.
It's about taking ownership
Ownership of our choices
of our choices and understanding our motivations.
and recognizing that we have the power to break those cycles.
We do. We have so much more power than we realize.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from childhood experiences to YouTube blame games to Hollywood psychopaths.
It's a lot.
It is a lot,
Yeah.
but it seems like the thread that connects it all is this need for greater self-awareness.
Absolutely. And that's where the real work begins. It's about moving beyond the blame and the labels
Right.
and really understanding ourselves and our place in the world.
This has been so insightful so far.
I'm glad.
I feel like I need to rethink some of my own assumptions.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of these deep dives, you know?
Right.
They challenge us to see things from new angles
Yeah.
and to question what we thought we knew.
It's true.
And that's how we grow.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay, so we're just getting started.
We are.
On this deep dive into narcissism, we've got a lot more to uncover, so stay tuned.
As we're talking about this self-awareness, I keep thinking about another point the source material brought up.
Okay.
It's not just about like our individual experiences
Right.
that shape our vulnerability to manipulation. It's also about the wider societal context.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, the source specifically mentions how socioeconomic factors play a role.
Okay.
So imagine a community where there's very limited access to education, healthcare, even just safe, stable housing.
Right.
Those kinds of systemic issues
Yeah.
can create an environment where people are much more likely to be taken advantage of,
Right.
whether it's by predatory individuals or even by institutions
Wow.
that don't have their best interest at heart.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
It's like the whole system is setting people up
it is.
to be more vulnerable.
And if we're not aware of those systemic factors, it's easy to fall into that blame the victim mentality.
Totally. And that brings us back to, what you were saying before about critical thinking.
Right.
And questioning the easy answers.
Questioning the easy answers, absolutely.
It's not enough to just focus on individual behavior.
It's not.
We also need to look at the bigger picture.
The bigger picture.
And ask, what are the underlying societal conditions
Exactly.
that are contributing to these problems?
That are creating the breeding ground
Right.
for these dynamics to flourish.
Wow, this is really making me rethink my whole perspective on all of this.
I'm glad.
Okay, so we've talked about how dangerous it is to oversimplify things and to label everyone as abusive,
Right.
who maybe has some narcissistic traits. But how do we actually make sense of those traits? Is it all black and white, or is there a spectrum?
Well, the source material definitely leans towards the spectrum idea.
Okay.
It argues that we all possess some degree of narcissism.
Right.
It's part of the human experience. It's what drives us to achieve, to stand out, to protect ourselves. But it's about where those traits fall on that spectrum and whether they're balanced by things like empathy, compassion, a genuine concern for others.
So, like, we all have selfish moments, right? But that doesn't mean we're all narcissists.
Exactly. It's about the frequency, the intensity, and the impact of those behaviors.
Okay.
The source uses an example of someone who might be very ambitious and driven in their career.
Okay.
They might come across as a little arrogant or self-centered at times.
Right.
But they're also capable of forming genuine connections and being supportive of their colleagues.
Right.
It's very different from someone who is constantly exploiting and manipulating others to climb the corporate ladder.
And leaving a trail of destruction in their wake.
Exactly. Two very different expressions.
Of that same trait.
Of that same trait, exactly.
That's a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah.
This is making me think about all those spot narcissist quizzes that you see online. Are those even accurate?
Well, the source material actually touches on that.
Really?
It cautions against relying on those simplistic tests or checklists.
Right.
Remember, narcissistic personality disorder is a complex clinical diagnosis
Right.
that requires professional evaluation.
So it's not something you can just diagnose?
It's not a DIY diagnosis.
From a BuzzFeed quiz.
Exactly. Those online quizzes might be entertaining, but they can also be misleading and potentially harmful.
Okay.
They can create a lot of unnecessary anxiety or lead to mislabeling people.
It's like self-diagnosing on WebMD.
Exactly. You end up thinking you have every disease under the sun.
That's so true. It's always best to consult with a qualified professional
Always.
if you have concerns about yourself or someone else.
Absolutely.
You were talking earlier about how Hollywood portrays psychopaths as these super obvious villains.
Right.
But the source material says that in real life, these predatory personalities are much harder to spot.
They are.
How do we begin to protect ourselves from that kind of subtle manipulation?
It starts with awareness. Okay. The more we understand the subtle tactics that manipulators use, the better equipped we are to recognize them.
Okay.
The source talks about things like love bombing,
Love bombing.
where someone showers you with excessive affection and attention early on to create a sense of dependence. Or gaslighting,
Gaslighting, yeah.
where they're distorting reality to make you question your own sanity.
Those are some seriously sneaky tactics.
They are, aren't they?
They are. So how do we know if we're actually dealing with a manipulator?
Right.
Or just someone who's, a little clueless in relationships?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the source really emphasizes paying attention to inconsistencies between words and actions.
Okay.
Does someone constantly promise to change,
Right.
but never follow through?
Yeah.
Do their actions contradict their words? That's a major red flag.
So it's not just about one or two instances. It's about a pattern of behavior.
About a pattern of behavior, absolutely.
Okay, and this is where trusting your intuition comes in.
Absolutely.
Right, if something feels off.
Even if you can't quite put your finger on it,
Yeah.
don't dismiss that feeling.
It's like that saying, when your gut speaks, listen.
Exactly. Your intuition is a powerful tool, and it's often trying to tell you something important.
So true. This whole conversation about manipulation is making me think about all the information that we're bombarded with these days, especially online.
Oh, it's overwhelming.
It feels like everyone's an expert.
Everyone's an expert.
Everyone has a platform.
Everyone has a platform.
And it's hard to know who to trust.
It really is.
The source material actually had some interesting things to say about this.
It did. It cautions against blindly accepting everything we see or hear, especially when it comes to complex topics like narcissism.
Okay.
It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if something is presented confidently and assertively,
Right.
it must be true.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case.
So how do we navigate this information overload and avoid getting sucked into those echo chambers of misinformation?
The source material emphasizes the importance of being critical consumers of information.
Okay.
Don't just accept what you see at face value.
Mm-hmm.
Ask questions. Look for evidence-based information. Consider different perspectives.
Yeah.
And be wary of anyone who claims to have all the answers or offers quick fixes.
To complex problems.
Complex problems.
Right. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Probably is. There are no shortcuts to genuine growth and understanding.
Right. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions.
It does. It's uncomfortable work.
This deep dive is really highlighting the need for critical thinking skills.
It is.
But I think it goes beyond just evaluating information. It's about questioning our own beliefs and biases, too.
You're absolutely right. The source material talks about the importance of being aware of our own tendencies to confirm our existing beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
It's called confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. I've heard of that.
And it can lead us to seek out information that reinforces what we already think.
Even if it's not accurate.
Even if it's not accurate or complete.
Right. So we're creating these filter bubbles.
We're curating our own reality.
Even if we don't realize we're doing it.
Even if we don't realize we're doing it. And that's why it's so important to actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Right.
And to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
It's not always comfortable.
No, it's not. But it's essential for growth.
Okay, so we've talked about how to spot manipulation, how to navigate information overload, how to challenge our own biases.
This is a lot.
It is a lot. What about when we're on the receiving end of narcissistic behavior?
Right.
What are some practical things that we can do to protect ourselves?
Well, the source material really emphasizes setting clear boundaries.
Okay.
It's about recognizing what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And then communicating those boundaries clearly and assertively.
So it's not about being aggressive.
Yeah.
It's about being firm.
It's about being firm and clear about your needs.
Okay.
And it's also about being willing to enforce those boundaries.
Even if it means walking away.
Even if it means walking away from a relationship or situation.
Wow.
That's no longer serving you.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
It's about taking back your power.
Absolutely.
And prioritizing your own well-being.
Your well-being has to come first.
And it's okay to ask for help.
Always.
Right? Don't be afraid to reach out to a therapist, a counselor, a trusted friend or family member.
Your support system
Yeah.
is everything.
I think that's such an important reminder.
Right.
We don't have to go through this alone.
We don't.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from societal influences to subtle manipulation tactics to the importance of setting boundaries. What are your final thoughts on all of this?
You know, as I reflect on these Spanish sources, I'm struck by the emphasis on self-awareness as a key to both understanding and protecting ourselves from narcissistic abuse.
Right.
And it's not about becoming paranoid or seeing narcissists everywhere.
Right.
It's about developing a deeper understanding of ourselves,
Yeah.
our motivations, and the dynamics of our relationships.
It's about turning that fascination with narcissism into an opportunity for self-discovery.
Exactly.
It's not about becoming an armchair psychologist or diagnosing everyone around you.
No.
Yeah.
It's about using this knowledge to understand yourself and your own patterns better.
And that's ultimately how we break free from those cycles of hurt
Yes.
and create healthier, more fulfilling relationships.
It all comes back to self-awareness.
This has been incredible so far.
Good. I'm glad.
I'm curious to hear what our listeners are thinking about all this.
Me too. It would be fascinating to hear their takeaways and how this resonates with their own experiences.
Okay, before we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they continue to explore this complex topic?
If you find yourself drawn to content about narcissism, ask yourself, what aspects of this resonate with your experiences?
Okay.
And what can you learn from it?
I like that.
This prompts self-reflection and personal growth,
Right.
moving beyond blame and towards understanding.
It's about taking ownership of our own journey
Yes,
and using this knowledge as a tool for positive change.
absolutely.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree. This has been a really insightful deep dive.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this exploration of narcissism.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights and food for thought.
And remember, the journey of self-discovery is ongoing.
Yes.
Keep asking questions, keep challenging your assumptions, and keep diving deep.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Understanding narcissism, it's not about pointing fingers, it's about looking in the mirror.
It's about taking a good hard look at ourselves, isn't it?
It is.
Recognizing that we all exist somewhere on that spectrum.
Right. And the more self-aware we are,
The better equipped we are.
the better we can navigate those really complex dynamics. Okay, so let's bring this all home for our listeners.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of heavy stuff. Childhood wounds, societal pressures, these manipulation tactics. What's the takeaway here?
Right.
What can people actually do with this information?
Well, one practical step the source material emphasizes is building a strong support system.
Oh, okay.
Surround yourself with people who are genuinely supportive, who
Okay.
validate your experiences, and who challenge you to grow in healthy ways.
So it's like having a reality check squad.
It is.
People who can kind of call you out
Call you out on your BS.
when you're falling into those old patterns.
Exactly. And on the flip side, be wary of people who drain your energy, who constantly put you down, or who seem to thrive on drama and conflict.
Yeah, those energy vampires.
Those energy vampires, those relationships might be worth reevaluating.
This makes me think of how important it is to take care of our own mental and emotional well-being.
Absolutely.
You know, if we're not in a good place ourselves,
Right.
it's harder to see those red flags and to set those boundaries.
It's so much harder. And the source material actually talks about the importance of self-care
Oh, okay.
as a form of protection against narcissistic abuse.
Interesting.
It's about prioritizing your own needs, engaging in activities that nourish your soul,
Right.
knowing when to step back and recharge.
So it's not selfish to put ourselves first.
It is not. You can't pour from an empty cup.
I love that.
You've got to take care of yourself in order to show up for others in a healthy way.
Okay, so we've got our support system in place. We're practicing self-care.
Yes.
But what about when we inevitably encounter those difficult personalities,
Right?
out in the wild?
Out in the wild. How do we deal with them?
The source material had some interesting insights on how to actually deal with narcissists.
One strategy it highlights is this idea of gray rocking.
Gray rocking.
Have you heard of this?
I have not.
It's basically about becoming as emotionally unresponsive as a gray rock.
Oh, yeah.
So it's about detaching from their attempts to provoke a reaction, to get under your skin, to draw you into their drama.
So don't engage, don't feed the beast.
Exactly. Narcissists often thrive on attention,
Right.
whether it's positive or negative.
Mm-hmm.
By refusing to give them that emotional fuel,
Yeah.
you're essentially taking away their power.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a form of self-defense.
I like it.
It's about protecting your own energy and sanity.
Yeah.
Of course, this isn't always easy, especially if you're dealing with a narcissist in a close relationship,
Right.
but it's a valuable tool to have in your arsenal.
Okay, so we've got gray rocking boundaries, self-care, strong support system. These are all great strategies.
It's a good start.
But I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from this whole deep dive
Yeah.
is that understanding narcissism, it's not just about protecting ourselves from toxic people.
It's not.
It's about using this knowledge to become more self-aware.
Absolutely.
It's about understanding our own vulnerabilities,
Right.
our own tendencies.
Fall into these unhealthy patterns.
Yeah.
Our own capacity for growth and change.
It's like the more we understand narcissism,
The more we understand ourselves.
the more we understand ourselves.
I like that.
And ultimately, that's what leads to true healing and transformation.
So well said.
Thank you.
Well, to our listeners, we hope that this deep dive into narcissism has given you some valuable insights.
Yes.
Some tools to navigate these complexities.
Remember, knowledge is power.
Yes, it is.
And the more we understand ourselves and the world around us, the better equipped we are to create healthier, happier lives.
I completely agree. And never underestimate the power of self-reflection, self-care, and seeking support when you need it.
It's so important
It is.
to have that support system.
Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.